Hello and welcome to an important episode of the course, where we'll show you how to easily prepare a flaky pie crust by first making the dough and then learning a process called blind baking. You only need to learn this once, the right way, and then you'll enjoy making any pie you like because preparing the fillings is so straightforward. Now before we start, let's have a look at all the tools and ingredients that we'll be using. In this episode, we'll be making 2 discs of pie dough for pies with lattice top like apple and blueberry pies. So we are using double the quantities. If you want a dough for a pie with no lattice top like a pumpkin or pecan, you can use only 1 disc, which requires of course half the quantities displayed in here. So first we start with preparing ice cold water in one of the measuring cups. We need only half a cup. So leave it on the side so the water gets colder as we prepare the dough. Now we're gonna do this with our hands to show you that you don't need any appliances to make perfect pies. But if you have a food processor, you can use it instead to save you some time and mix the ingredients better. So in a large bowl, we start by adding the flour, then half a teaspoon of salt, and mix them together using a large whisk. Next, we need to mix the unsalted butter with the flour. It has to be very cold, so take it out of the fridge and mix it with the flour immediately. If you're doing this by your hand, start breaking the butter down into flakes with your fingers. Now once you achieve a similar consistency to this, you'll then start to notice that the dough starts to come together if you press it with your hands. We now need to drizzle the iced water to make it form a workable dough. So we're gonna do this over 3 times. We drizzle some water and then mix it with our hands. Now you'll start to feel that the dough is coming together. Once you achieve a similar consistency to this, bring your baking mat and spill the dough over. Now start putting it together with your hands. Again, this is a large quantity to work with, so we need to break it down into 2 parts. Now we take some of that and start putting it together with our hands to form a ball. We also need to break this down into 2 parts, and then putting them together into a larger one. After that, shape it into a disc without over kneading it, because if we do that, then we're going to activate some of the gluten in the dough, and that does not make a flaky crust. And don't worry if it looks dry and crumbly. Once we place it in the fridge, the hydration will distribute within it to make it come together. Now we do the same with the second dough. Now using a plastic wrap, we wrap both discs. Once they're sealed, press again with your hands to shape a disc and close any large cracks. Now refrigerate for 1 hour. You can stop the episode here if you'll be making a pie with a lattice top like an apple or a blueberry pie, and watch that episode. But if you're making a pie that requires only one disc, like a pecan or a pumpkin pie, you need to bake the crust first, in a process called blind baking, which is basically baking the crust before adding the filling. We'll also do this process again for the leftover dough to make the mini pies later in the course. Now we take one disc out of the fridge and let it come to room temperature. Depending on your environment, it could take 30 to 45 minutes. Now once it has warmed up, we bring the rolling pin and some flour. Unwrap the dough and keep some flour on the baking mat. You'll need around 1/4 of a cup. We'll use that to sprinkle it over the rolling pin on both sides of the dough and on the baking mat as we roll the dough. This is important to make sure it doesn't stick and tear when we roll it. We start rolling slowly and add flour as we go. Now once you're done, check the size with your pie dish. It should be a little larger than the dish. If not, roll it a little more and check again. Alright, now we need to put it in the dish. But we'll not rush this process. We'll do so by wrapping the dough on the rolling pin and then unwrap it on the dish. This way we can transfer it safely to the pie dish without tearing. Now bring the pie dish and unroll the dough over it. Without pressing too hard, use your fingers to let the dough come into place and cover the edges inside the dish. Now use a knife to remove all the excess and put them back together. Wrap them in plastic and put them in the fridge or freezer. We'll be using them later in the course to make mini pies. We need now to strengthen the edges of the pie. So use your fingers to attach the dough to the edge of the dish. Now if we take this to the oven as it is, the crust in the center will rise and it might break. So first we will use a fork to poke small holes in the dough so the air can get through. And second, we need to add some weights inside to make sure it stays in place. So take a large parchment paper and fold it 3 times. First into a rectangle, then a square like this, and lastly a triangle. Now place the edge of the triangle at the center of the dish, and then use the scissors to cut any excess. Now we have a circular parchment paper. Attach it to the dough and spill the weights inside. Of course you don't have to have similar pie weights, you can use dry beans or rice instead. Now give it a little shake to distribute them inside. and take it for the first bake. We place it inside a preheated oven at 420 Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. Then take it out of the oven and carefully remove the pie weights and parchment paper, because they will be extremely hot. An optional thing you can do is to wrap aluminum foil around it to protect the edges. It depends on how the heat distributes inside the oven. If you place the lower rack very low, then you don't have to do this step. Now bake at 375 Fahrenheit for 25 minutes. Once it's done, take it out of the oven and remove the aluminum foil. Now that the center of the crust is baked, you can check it with a fork by tapping. It should be hard and flaky. And that's how to make and bake a flaky pie crust.